bars turn up so much now I just can't turn up. Don't call me back since you can't answer when I call you. Daddy was a rolling stone, I get it from my father. Chain so heavy that I can't.
Welcome back to the Views from a Gravel Out podcast for another episode 19, previewing the Bills and the Miami Dolphins ahead of Thursday Night Football on the eve of it. I'm joined by my co-host Michael, and we're going to kind of dissect this game, go into the ins and outs of it, discuss the keys of the game, the X factors. We're going to talk about some parlays that we have cooked up for you, and our game prediction. First, I wanna check in with Mike. How you doing tonight, Michael?
I'm good. I'm alive.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
great.
always
I'm excited for
reassuring.
tomorrow. Very
Yeah.
excited for tomorrow. That's all
Very.
I can think
And
about.
it's always fun when they go up against the Dolphins. As good as the team may be, it's a fun matchup to see all the time because fireworks happen. You know, you got an explosive offense in Miami who really haven't found a way to beat the Bills.
I typically seem to care more whenever we play the Dolphins
It's
because
just
Dolphins fans are just fucking brutal.
they're ridiculous. And
Mhm.
this is like the annoying little brother because the Bills have dominated this matchup now for what feels like the better part of a decade. For as long as Josh Allen's been in the Bills uniform, at least, and that's
Mhm.
been a while. So, lots to get into, but we're gonna kind of kick it off with the keys of the game. And what me and Mike had briefly discussed off air was the running game of the Miami Dolphins and how dominant this team is. Now, Raheem Mostert is out. That does play a small factor. I do think Devon Achane is the guy this year. I think, Mostert's kind of hitting that age curve where it's to the point where it's going to be mostly Achane rest of the way.
It should be.
And it should be. Obviously, they got a rookie in Jalen Wright who hasn't seen the field yet. He was a healthy scratch in week one. And then they got Jeff Wilson, who I've always liked as sort of a depth piece. And so I don't really think the running game's going to take too big of a hit just because of what they're able to scheme up and do is just so creative. And sort of that's the interesting thing about this Dolphins offense and Mike McDaniel and what he can do because really it's sort of something that we've never seen before and what the Dolphins are able to do and create on offense. You see sort of these RPOs and the way they can counter it with runs. It's hard to beat. But the Bills, for some reason, under Sean McDermott, have found a way to counter this. And I do think a big part of it is having a guy like Matt Milano on the field. But Sean McDermott's always schemed up very well against the Dolphins. So I would start by saying defending the run and taking care of that. Because if you can really limit Tua in this offense and make them one-dimensional, which is what the Jaguars did. And if you watch that Jaguars-Dolphins game, the Jaguars are the reason they lost that game. They
Mhm.
blew the game. The Dolphins didn't really play very well throughout the entirety of that game, especially on offense. Uh, they weren't running the ball with extreme efficiency. And really the Jags had a good game plan going into that game defensively. Um, so it'll be interesting. It's actually funny because Tua had a 35% drop back success rate, which was the third lowest since 2022 for him. And they just weren't throwing the ball very well. There was a few splash plays here and there, but I think the Jags did very well. So I want to go to you now, Michael. What do you think the Bills need to do to really kind of stop the Dolphins from just running all over this defense?
I think they just have to really lock in on that nickel defense. I think if they can stop Tyreek Hill over the top and keep him and Jalen Waddle honest, I feel like they leave them no choice but to run these dink and dunk plays. And the only way that they're going to stop them from really kind of rolling is if they establish pressure early. If they can look like how they did for, we'll call it the second part of the third quarter, all the way through the fourth of last game, I feel like they have a really good chance at least keeping the Dolphins offense honest. I mean, they're going to look explosive. They're going to look great. I mean, they have three of the absolute best speedy athletes that you can have in the league.
Mhm.
You just can't let them get massive chunk plays. You can't let
Yeah.
Devon Achane run for 8 yards a carry. You can't let, Jalen Waddle, you know, dink and dunk you for 12 yards here, Tyreek Hill 8 yards there. You just can't do it.
No. And that's, I think, why the Bills have done so well against the Dolphins because sort of their defensive MO is to defend the chunk plays and let teams kind of slowly and methodically work down the field. If the Dolphins are willing to do that, I think they'll find success, but that's just really not their style. Their
No.
style is to really work the seams, work deeper digs and look for explosive kind of plays. And those are the kind of games where it really tests, Mike McDaniel's patience and Frank Smith's patience as play callers, because they want to be this, guns a blazing offense that gets 30, 40 yards a play. It feels like, and it's like the Bills are going to prevent you from doing that with the shells and the coverages they really present you. And I think that it's going to be it's going to be again a big test for what they're able to do schematically against this Bills defense.
They
And
need to establish the pressure early because if
yeah,
if they do what they did last game where they had to start blitzing a safety or blitzing a corner, then you're leaving one less guy in coverage, and that's just you can't afford to do that against this
yeah,
team.
and you can't really let an auxiliary piece step up like a Jonnu Smith, or if Odell play. I don't know if he's playing or not, but if Odell plays, and you don't want another piece to really step up, because the Dolphins essentially have never really invested in another receiver outside of Waddle and Hill. And why would you? I mean, they're amazing at what they
Yeah.
do, but it's like if you're able to kind of, keep them at bay, you can only do so much against players like that. But if you can keep them at bay, it really limits what they can do, because the offense is obviously, it funnels through their playmakers. Tua is paid to do sort of a game manager's job in a sense in that
Not going to win
offense.
you the game, but he
He's
won't
not
lose
going to
it
be the
either.
reason you win that game. He's going to be the reason, he's going to put his playmakers in position to win the
Hmm.
game. And I think, Tua does an excellent job in this system. I think he plays the role to a T, but it's also like, when it comes to January and February, when you need those gotta have it plays, Tua's probably not going to be your guy, and you need these playmakers to step up. So I find it very interesting to see how, like, if anybody, if at all, is going to be able to find a way to rattle this Bills defense and kind of divert some attention away from Waddle and Hill. Um, I'm going to flip over to the other side of the ball, and essentially the same story in the run game. And now the Jaguars were really good running the ball against the Dolphins. They averaged almost 5 yards a carry, 4.9, very close. So they kind of just did what they wanted to do. And the Jaguars were pretty much 2 inches away from being up 24-7 against the Dolphins.
Hmm.
If not for, I think it was an ETN fumble that costed them those points, but sort of self-inflicted errors. You know, like the Dolphins really didn't prove to me, at least in week one. Obviously, a lot can change. It's a long season. That their ability to defend the run is at the level they want it to be. Um, Look, they're pretty thin at that position, at D line as it is. We're talking about Jalen Phillips, so an Achilles tear, it takes a while to heal from. We saw
Hmm.
we saw with Von Miller last year, like he was
Yeah,
nowhere near ready to play. And I know he's an older player and it affects him differently, but the Achilles tear like really can derail careers.
especially a pass rusher.
Yeah, when you talk about it, like Tre'Davious White really never been the same player. Running backs never really come back from the injury. Pass rushers, there's a lot of, your get off is a big part of your game, and you need to use your Achilles to do that. So running the ball, I think if you're able to kind of keep the Dolphins offense off the field, and I know you have a great offense yourself, but if you can kind of, sort of in a sense, kill a bird with, kill two birds with one stone, in a sense. So like, I
Let
think you
James
need to.
Cook cook.
Exactly. And even Ray Davis should have a role in this game, working in
Ray
between the
Davis was
tackles.
solid last week.
He was.
I mean, he did drop
He
that
was.
pass, but he was
That was actually,
okay.
I think that was Ty Johnson. I
Was
think
it
it was
Ty
Ty
Johnson?
Johnson that dropped that pass.
I thought it was Ray
But
Davis.
regardless, I mean, it was a low ball. It wasn't really pretty or
Right,
anything.
but Ray Davis looked in the vast
He
majority of
looked
his
the part.
opportunities
He
solid.
looked the
Yeah,
part. I mean, like,
like
and
no
we're talking
qualms.
about, I talked about with Trent on the previous episode where you want sort of that thumper in between the
Hmm.
tackles to kind of take the load off of James Cook, because that's not really his game, and that's what he can do. And I think if you're able to kind of be multidimensional, we'll kind of get into this a little bit later, but even with Josh Allen's legs and using him into the game, incorporating that, and sort of having this unique three different levels of sort of your run game, where you have James Cook kind of being your speedier, quicker running back, and then you got Ray Davis who can work in the middle, and then Ty Johnson sort of a lightning bolt, and then you got Josh Allen obviously. So and obviously even Curtis Samuel, who I'm sure
Did
that
not use enough
he'll get his
last week, in
looks.
my opinion.
And we'll kind of get into that. I mean, obviously, I think a lot of it was the injury, kind of just being careful and cautious with that. We look at the snap count. I just don't think the team is going to be sitting here and be like, "Oh, we want Curtis Samuel being the fourth
Not when you
most
have Shakir. Yeah.
snaps on the team." Like I don't think that's what their goal is. But yeah, running the ball. And yeah, would you like anything to you add anything to that or
I think we pretty much covered it. I mean, just let
yeah,
James Cook cook. Let him do what he did last week. I mean,
yeah,
don't run the ball every single time on 1st and 10. That'd be
first
too
down.
sensational.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he looked really, really, really explosive last week, and
Yeah.
I loved everything I saw from him.
Especially when you're going up against a first-time play caller in Anthony Weaver, who was with the Ravens last year. Obviously, Joe Brady doesn't have a ton of experience himself either, but he has the edge in terms of that. And so, don't really put yourself in a position where you're being redundant, doing the same thing over and over again. And sort of if you're able to kind of keep the Dolphins honest and on just really do what you're supposed to do. I don't think it needs to be super like complex. You can simplify things if you have to, but run the ball, and I think the Bills can do it very efficiently with Josh Allen.
Establish the
Speak
run, get some
Yeah.
play action in there, and you'll get a deep play downfield.
Speaking of Josh Allen, I think that this game is going to be one of those Josh Allen games where it's like,
Like every
and it
game against the
usually is
Dolphins.
against the Dolphins.
Every
It's
game.
like
I think he's won
this.
AFC Player of the Week 5 times.
It's insane.
Yeah.
I think he's averaged over 300 passing yards every like the last 5, which is like
The last
nuts.
5 games, he's been disgusting. It's been
He just
an
has
absolute
their
domination.
number for whatever reason, and it's awesome because there's a divisional rival, and yeah, I think it's just Josh this game. Like he is gonna be the
Gonna
reason
need to
the
be.
Bills win or lose this game, and it's usually
Yeah.
the case most of the time. But um, I think really it's just the Bills are basically going to tell him, put on the Superman cape and get us this win because you get a win against Miami early in the season, then you get them back in Buffalo later in the year. You got them at home. Like you're in a very favorable position now where you have sort of that one game advantage where, yes, if you fall behind, you can still kind of use that to catch back up because you have
They're
already
not the
beaten the
same team in
Dolphins.
the cold. They're
No,
just not. You saw
no, they're
that
not.
last year in the
You
Chiefs
saw it in
game. They
Kansas City.
just,
Yeah.
they
It's just,
crumble.
and it's really sort of interesting because it's like their inability to adapt throughout the course of the season has been their downfall for many, many years now. Even going back to Brian Flores, which was kind of the opposite, where he did adapt and then like it fell apart at the end. So like
Last couple of years, they've started off really hot out the gate,
it's
and they look
it's
sensational. And then, you get to week 7, 8,
it's
and you're
like
like,
what the
okay, you're
hell?
starting to see a minor drop off. And then they still,
Yeah.
they finish with a good record, but
It's almost
they're
like
just
as
not getting
soon
it
as you
done.
get that first wind chill, it's like it's game over. And go to X factors, and we'll start on the defensive side of the ball. I'm gonna start with you, Mike. Who is your X factor for this game and why?
My biggest X factor for this game is going to be Gregor. So last week, obviously, he had a huge game. He had the strip sack. He had three total sacks, 3 tackles for loss. AFC Defensive Player of the Week.
Yeah, yeah. He
Yeah,
took it
I'm
home.
not saying I need that again. I mean, that'd be insane if he did, but he is going to be a big part of establishing this pass rush, especially with, Von Miller coming in and out on passing and rushing downs. I need him to be that guy that can go out there and kind of play that JJ Watt role where he's going to go out, maybe swat a ball, get some
Mhm.
pressures, finishes the day with a sack. Great. But I need him to more consistently look like that force to be reckoned with, not just see it 3 games a year and
Yeah,
then wonder what happened, you
consistency.
know? Yeah.
If I feel like if he shows it again this week, now I feel like we're really confident in
I'll
his
be a
ability.
believer. I'll start to be a believer.
I'd start to ride that wagon
Yeah.
because I mean we saw like flashes of it in the preseason, and now in week 1 he was completely dominant. And so you're able to do it against this kind of offense. I think he's starting to
I'll be
show that
feeling
he's the
good.
real deal.
Yeah.
Um, I went with Dorian Williams, just for the fact that these linebackers are really going to be tested a lot. Not only him, but Terrell Bernard as well. But I went with him because like he is, essentially the better athlete of the two. And what the Dolphins like to do is they like to stress the hell out of you with wide
Hmm.
zone, RPOs. I
The
mean, they run
motions.
probably RPOs and motion more than anybody in the league. I would say probably motion is like ridiculous. Like they
Hmm.
usually are first.
Every play.
Yeah, they will ensure that your linebackers are stressed out, and this is a young and sort of semi inexperienced linebacker duo, and so it's going to be up to them to kind of have that mindset where they have to weather the storm. They know it's going to be a, a 60-minute effort, and I'm very curious to see how he handles that, and I think he's going to be able to do a nice job.
He looked really
Um,
fast last week. Like
he did,
he
and
looked like he was
I feel
flying
like it
out
was
there.
also a situation where like the interior defensive line didn't set them up for success whatsoever. They
Mm-mm.
weren't winning, they weren't penetrating, and it really put them in bad spots. And I feel like they made that they did the best of what they could. And yeah, I think that Dorian Williams is going to have a big role in this game, especially defending those runs, sort of those toss,
Outside the tackles.
stretch wide zone
Hmm.
runs, and he's going to be really, I think, a key for the Dolphins to run his way. I think obviously they're going to run his way more than Bernard, but it'll be interesting to see like how he's able to defend the run and sort of have his influence in the game. We'll go to offense now. I'll start and then we'll go to you, Michael. I went with Khalil Shakir, and there's a couple reasonings for it. Um, the Dolphins were targeted 13th most in the slot in 2023. Kader Kohu is their nickel corner, and he hasn't really done a great job against the Bills in his history. You think back to last year in that 48-20 blowout win, he was getting burned a lot of the times. And I know it's a different receiving room and whatnot, but the Bills know how to attack this secondary, and it's why they've had so much success throwing the ball against them because they know the weaknesses and the strengths of it. And I think, you obviously got Jalen Ramsey on the outside. He's not somebody you
Healthy
want
now.
to target who is healthy. And then, even Kendall Fuller, who they added this offseason, who I think is a very, very solid corner in this league. So you look to work into the slot. And I'm sure Jordan Poyer will have his hand in this and he'll get help. But in those situations where you can target him, I think Khalil Shakir is going to eat because we're talking about a guy who is probably most poised to get those looks on third down and those tough catches over the middle. And I think that's where the Bills are going to win in this game. It's going to be a lot of running and a lot of, you know, working over the middle of the field, which is
They did
what they
very
did
well at
against the
converting on
Cardinals.
third downs last week.
They did. And I was very curious to see like what he would do. And the Dolphins played a lot of deep droppers, where they kind of drop back with the safeties and they kind of open up those lanes over the middle and kind of allowed the Jaguars sort of to work the intermediate parts of the game. And they didn't really want to give up the deep ball. And obviously that game plan can change, but that's kind of what they did early. And that's what we can, what we know so far. And so I think Khalil Shakir and even a guy like Dalton Kincaid, who was sort of keyed out of the game by the Cardinals, but he'll have his opportunities, and I think that's really where you're going to have to win if you're the Bills. I know you went with a different player who plays on the outside, so tell me about your X factor for the offensive side of the ball, which is actually another receiver.
My X factor for this game is going to be Keon Coleman, and it's kind of for the exact reason that you just stated. I want to see Keon Coleman be used more in that intermediate passing
Yeah,
game. Obviously, he's not. He did have that big catch last week, but he's not really gonna burn your corner when he's
no,
playing,
no,
10 yards back. So I would love to see Keon, more in those opportunities of getting, those 12-yard passes, those 8-yard passes, where he can just get the chains moving, get
hmm
a rhythm, get it going to where if you're hitting Keon, all of a sudden you got Kincaid over the middle of the field, and now you have Shakir getting less attention, or now you can run the ball or run a power with Josh. I feel like opening up this offense is going to revolve a lot around the development of Keon Coleman on
hmm
if he can really develop as a route runner in this league. Because I don't
yeah,
need him to be that burner. I don't.
he
I
doesn't need to
want
be.
him to be more
No,
of that intermediate route runner that we can just pepper when needed.
yeah, yeah, and I think he can really elevate the ceiling of this offense if he's able to kind of take those strides, like you had mentioned, and like I spoke with Trent on the previous episode, like I was impressed with what I saw, and 4 catches for 51 yards. It was up
Got
there
great
for.
hands.
He does. He's very strong hands, and he's got
Hmm.
a very, he's very strong at the catch point. So even with his inability to separate, you can kind of still trust him to pluck these balls away from these
Go get it.
defensive backs, and I really, yeah, like in the intermediate areas, sort of drags and crossers, like it'll be interesting to see like his ability to grow as a player after the catch and see where he develops there. I feel like that's where he has a lot of room to grow. You saw some of the dancing around
Mhm.
and whatnot in week one, but I think he can be great. It's just really, like you said, peppering him, putting him in those positions where you're not forcing him to be something he's not.
Mhm.
I think the notion with this big, but a big wide receiver is like,
He's gonna be
I
your
want you to
X.
go ball, be my X, and just catch go ball and just win 1-on-1.
Doesn't have to be.
He doesn't have to do that. You can win with him in different ways, and I think it's important to realize that not only is just as Bills fans, but fans around the league for just that archetype. Think about Michael Pittman. I think that's a perfect example. He's not a guy who's going to win deep. I don't know how it's going to work with Anthony Richardson because that's not really his style, but we'll see. I mean, I feel like that was the perfect comp, and that's what I gave him when the Bills drafted him. So yeah, those kind of cover it for X factors. We'll move on to Parlay Builder, which is something new we're doing here. So we have a 4-leg parlay. Odds are through FanDuel. We're going to give you guys our 4-leg parlay for the game. It's something we plan on doing every week to kind of give you some of our insight and what we believe into the game. So we have 4 legs for you. I'll go over the first leg, and then Mike will go over the second leg, vice versa. First leg I went with, and much back to what I just said with Khalil Shakir, his over is at 3.5, which is 102, I believe, on FanDuel.
Minus
Um,
102.
or minus 102. So over 3.5 receptions. Like I said, I think he's going to be really targeted a lot in the intermediate, short areas of the game. Um, Based on what we saw with the Dolphins' coverage tendencies, I think that's really where the Bills are going to work, at least early on. Obviously, it can change throughout the course of the game, but I think Khalil Shakir is going to be, I think, probably the most targeted player not named Dalton Kincaid in this offense. Curtis Samuel could obviously have his name in that hat, but
His
I like,
receptions are only at 1.5 if someone
and
likes
we're
that.
also talking about like a guy who's just nasty after the catch. Just on a side note, like I legitimately think Khalil Shakir is one of the best receivers after the catch. I said it on Twitter. I think like when you watch him, when he has the ball in his hands, he's doing crazy
Shifty.
shit every
Very
time.
shifty. Yeah.
Like the Steelers game,
I feel like every
unbelievable play.
touchdown is just after the
It's
catch. It's never
ridiculous.
it's
And
never like, an in stride reception. He's, dodging 6 dudes to get
he's
to the
like
end zone.
sneakily fast too. He's not
Mhm.
like he pulls away from defenders very, very easily and nonchalantly. Like it's very impressive what he's able to do after the catch. So I'll let you go on the second leg here. This is a Josh Allen leg, which you'll kind of find out that's the rest of
Yeah,
our
it's a
legs,
trend.
but it's a trend. So
So
give us our second leg.
the last 13 games against the Dolphins, this bet is basically an absolute guarantee. Death,
Hmm.
taxes in this leg. Josh Allen over 2 passing touchdowns. The last
Yeah.
13 games, I mean, he is obviously eaten against them, but I just have a feeling this is going to carry over effortlessly. I
Oh
think
yeah.
it's an absolute lock. Absolute lock.
Yeah. And also we did
Put the
a
house on it.
yeah. I think you have to. Why wouldn't you bet on Josh Allen? And also we went
Yeah.
with over 241 passing yards, which is minus 113 on FanDuel.
Hmm.
I think Josh Allen is going to have a heavy influence in this game. Kind of goes without saying. We know how it is when he plays the Dolphins. He's just amazing. He's really good at what he does, and he shows up in these games. And I don't expect that to change. You look at the trends, and Josh Allen has had the most success in his career against the Dolphins. I think last 5 games he's had over 300 passing yards against this team.
I could tell you the yards he's had his last five
Yeah, go
games.
ahead if you
His
if you
last
can pull
five
that up for
games,
us.
his passing yards are 359, 320, 352, 304, and 400. Put the fucking house on 1.5 touchdowns and his passing yards at 241.5. Put
It's
everything
ridiculous.
you own, sell your firstborn, and win a lot of fucking money.
I mean, my gosh, the guy
Yeah.
is just automatic against this team. Yeah, like I said, I don't expect that to change. The last leg we did was his over on rushing, which was 35.5. I don't have the odds in front of me. If you could tell me, Michael,
Minus
for the rush,
113.
minus 113 as well. So yeah, I think this is going to be a Josh Allen game. He's gonna have heavy influence on the outcome of this game, and really, I think the Bills are just gonna ask him to put on the Superman cape and be Josh. And unfortunately, I feel like I don't want us to be in the position where we have to do that to squeak by in games, but so be it. It's
Mhm.
entertaining. It's great football. So
The odds on
I'm
that
excited.
parlay 4 legs together are plus 746. So
That's great.
$100 wins $746.
That's really good,
Mhm.
especially considering the history. And look, I know Mike had a good week one in terms of betting, so I would trust him on this one. He came out on top in week one, so
Did.
take that, odds makers. Yeah, that pretty much covers it for us. Other than the fact that we're gonna give our prediction here to wrap up here. I want to go with Michael first. Give us your score prediction and what you think happens in this game.
I think it's going to be a close game, but I think the score is going to be 31-28. I just
Okay.
think Devon Achan, as much as they try, is just going to continue to barbecue this team. But on the other end, Josh Allen is going to do the same, and it's just going to be a super high scoring, super
Back and
fast
forth.
paced, just yeah, absolute shootout. And I think it's just going to come down to honestly whoever scores last.
Yeah, I went with the Bills winning 28-27. Much like you said, I think it's gonna come down to who converts in the red zone. And like the Dolphins usually tend to struggle a little bit more in the red zone just because in the red zone you run out of space. You can't really have the full extent of the offense and the things that the Dolphins want to do. So it'll be interesting to see like how that plays out in this game. So I have the Bills winning at 28-27. Yeah, like you said, I think it's gonna be a close game. I don't think it's fair to say that we're going to blow out the Dolphins. They are a very good football team. They're divisional rival, but they are a good football team. They're going to give the Bills a run for their money. They're in their home crowd, and there'll be a lot of Bills fans, I'm sure. But yeah, I got the Bills as well. This was more of a shorter episode, a quicker one. Obviously, it's a shorter week, so can only condense it as much as I can. But it was fun. Obviously, it's gonna be a fun game as always against the Dolphins tomorrow night on Amazon Prime. Bills going to Hard Rock Stadium and look to start off 2-0. Without further ado, I wish everybody a good night. The links will be in the description. Spotify, Apple Podcast, TikTok, you name it, will be all in there below for you guys. And everybody have a good night and go Bills.
Go Bills.